Well, well, well. Would you look who it is? Yeah, it's me. It's me. It's been a while, I know. I had a lot of casting work on. Getting schedules matched up with other people is kind of difficult. Look, excuses. That's all I'm hearing. But for real, it's been a busy few weeks. So, took a little bit of time off. I've been working on some ideas on the back burner, as it were, to try and get them out by myself. Don't necessarily have to match up with someone else. So in theory, that's a bit easier to do when I'm busy. And also, you'll notice a bit of a format change here as well. Maybe makes things a bit easier going forwards. Knocked about half an hour off of it. Still conversational in nature. We're not like straight questions from me, but I think it allows me to stick pretty solidly to the topics that I want with Jaws, and it's a little more topical. If you follow Jaws the caster, there's a good amount of questions that are about him and about the ecosystem of Overwatch, the part of it that he's involved with, right? He's recently got a new partner, a bit of a role shift. There's some changes with the contract, some changes with the format of the Overwatch League. We talk about all that kind of stuff, and then it does bleed into a bit of a conversation about commentary and newer people getting into it, and perhaps the fact that there is no guide and stuff that obviously I've talked about a few times. Some fundamentals and whatnot are being missed in places by newer members and things like that. So it's a really cool conversation. Look, let me know in the comments though, like if this change is uncool, if you want them to be longer, if you want it to be more podcasty and vibe, or where to reach me if you want to send something privately, that's also absolutely fine. But look, without further ado, let's get into the interview. All right, welcome in everybody. Welcome to another interview. I've got Jaws on today. I think we met very, very briefly back in the day when you were at the Newell. I think I was just starting my career, and I think it was like your last season on Overwatch. I think we had a bit of a small exchange in the Red Bull gaming sphere. Don't know if that rings any bells.
Oh yeah, the gaming sphere. Yeah, I remember doing that event actually because me and Des were in like the back room. Casting, that was super fun, man. I actually miss those days, I'm not gonna lie. I think about that kind of stuff a lot. I miss working with Des and the Newell and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, gone down different paths a little bit, him moving to a different game. But yeah, it's kind of cool. It's cool to touch base and get to chat to you and ask you a few questions, I suppose, about the future. I guess we could start. One of the things I was curious about, especially when things in the Overwatch League have been very, very regimented over the last few seasons, right? And you've worked with like a handful of partners, particularly more from that like color side. How do you work your way through different partners? Like, what are some of the challenges that you face?
Honestly, I don't think I've faced many challenges working with new people. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think it's pretty easy, especially when you are paired up with people that have previous broadcast experience or have been casting like a long time. I think the biggest challenge for me was like switching roles, like from play-by-play to color has been it's going to feel a bit odd, like not doing a lot of the play-by-play things, although I think I'll probably still do some of them, like the throws and whatnot. But going from partner to partner, I think it's pretty easy going like moving into the league with Hex, like last year. That was pretty simple. Like, Hex has been broadcasting for a long time, like, so he kind of showed me the ropes in terms of like how Overwatch League works. But because he's been broadcasting a long time, like, it's really easy to kind of get into. Vicky, the same. I mean, she's been broadcasting a long time as well. I don't know if it's longer than me, probably about the same time as me. And to talk to her about how long she's been broadcasting, but she's been doing like a ton of other games. Like, she casted like Evo for fighting games, Smash, and she's done Pokken and stuff. So she's really experienced in kind of every role of broadcasting and like every type of broadcasting too, in that sense, because fighting game broadcasting is like way different to FPS. So having someone that has a lot of experience in multiple titles is it just makes it super easy to transition into a new duo. Like, yeah, I can't really think of any challenges. Maybe they'll come up during the season, I'm not sure, but that's probably it'll be like my bad because I'm switching roles. So It will be less on the fact that it's a new partner, more just me messing things up, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I guess you get to that point as well where um a lot of people like starting out with commentary work and stuff like that, and a lot of esports stuff, right? It begins as a bit of a hobby or like volunteer work, so maybe you can't dedicate as much time to it. But I guess you're in this position, have been for a while, where it is your full-time job, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so therefore, I think putting all your resources, putting all your focus on it, it makes sense that, you know, professionalism and experience come into play when you're having to transition or work with new people, that kind of thing. Whereas, like, I don't know, a position that like I would be in, I'm dedicating the full time to it, but finding, you know, that home, as it were, in terms of the work. Every now and then I have to work with someone I've not worked with before, so it's a little hard, can be kind of jarring. You know, you have maybe 20 minutes beforehand that you can talk things over and just figure things out, maybe
Yeah.
a bit of messaging, but it's not quite the same sort of level. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, especially like, as you say, switching roles. I don't know, do you feel there's maybe a place for like hybrid within Overwatch? I'll admit I've watched like bits and pieces, you know the game, but I'm not as ear to the ground as obviously yourself will be. But do you think there's maybe space for like a more hybrid style in Overwatch?
Um, Kind of, yeah. I think Overwatch is a weird one because it is like a weird game because it is so fast that sometimes if you do stick to the kind of the play-by-play and color, the color can kind of, unless the play-by-play can control it really well and just know when fights are coming up, the color almost sometimes can't get air and edgeways, you know? Like with League, which is the game I did previous to Overwatch for like 3 years, it was like, well, early game, the color talks a lot. Like small engagement, boom, play by play comes in. Then the color will be talking, then play by play a little bit, and kind of slowly but surely building up to the big crescendo of like a Baron fight or like an Elder Dragon fight or something like that. But like in Overwatch, it's so quick that you're so as a color caster you're so pressured for time. You have to be very concise and you have to be very clear with your points. If you look at someone like Jake and ZP from last year, there's a very clear divide. Like ZP is play by play, Jake is color, because Jake, ex-pro player, knows an absolute ton about the game, and ZP is just a play-by-play. Like, not to say he doesn't know about the game, but you know what I mean. Like, he just does play-by-play. He wouldn't really add too much in there. He would more facilitate Jake. Like myself, I had a very different approach to the game and always kind of have done in terms of casting and play-by-play, and it's something that I started very early on in casting Overwatch because I felt like I knew a lot about the game, but as a play-by-play, you're not normally, especially in League, you're not normally like going in hard and going in depth. But for myself, I wanted to develop a style where I was doing a little bit of both, and I was really able to kind of expand that and flex that a little bit last year with Hex, where I was, and in Contenders as well, I was doing like actually quite a bit of color as well as the play-by-play. So I think it does depend on who you're partnered with and your own style specifically. I think you can stick to that regimented play-by-play and color like a Jake and ZP from 2020, or you can do what I've kind of done, which is kind of weave color into there as well and be like a more informative play-by-play than just hard hitting, like, yeah, static roles like I mentioned before. It, is there room for hybrid? Maybe. I don't know. I think it just depends on how you feel your knowledge level, where your knowledge level is in the game, and how you feel it would work on broadcast. Because some people don't like that. Like some other casters don't like that. They would rather stick to those roles. But I mean, working with Hex, probably the easiest person I've ever worked with ever. Like he was very open to just trying anything and like very adapting to what I want, very adaptive to what I wanted to bring to a broadcast. And I think that's why we worked out so well last year, in me being like this, not hybrid, but like me dropping a lot of color knowledge in there as well.
Yeah.
If that answers your question, I know I ramble a lot, but like
No,
hopefully that covered all the bases.
indeed, it's all good. I think it is curious though, for sure, because like I'd say 95%, probably higher than that, of the work that I've done is on CS, right? So, and that speed, that kind of thing, it definitely resonates with what I tend to work on, and how hard it can be to have solidly regimented roles within CS. Sometimes it is tried, certainly we have the likes of Launders, for example, for a long time was just solid color, and more recently has had to build up the more play-by-play side of things. I suppose, though, it definitely does raise some interesting questions, right? In the fact that, like, you touch on having a bit of knowledge of the game, even if you are doing play-by-play, and you yourself, obviously you stream a fair amount, but also play the game to a relatively high level for an individual, like as compared to the grand scheme, the wider array of people that play the game. Do you think it's, like, for you've kind of touched on it a little bit, but, like, I guess how important do you feel it is to have that more hands-on knowledge of the game?
Not as much as I think people. I don't know if it's a meme though. I don't know if it is actually
Yeah,
a meme. It's
yeah.
like, oh yeah, you definitely should be high level and stuff, because it's a very Redditor Jones, Redditor Andy like take, isn't it? It's like, oh, only the top level players should be commentators, and it's like, yeah, but have you ever thought about how and what it takes to be a commentator too? Like, they're very, very different skill sets. Me play a game to a very high level, or me shouting mic. Like, there's two very different skill sets to that. Um, I think I don't think you need to play the game to a high level to do either role, as long as like you study the game. I think people like Monty, people like Matt and Wolf, like these kind of color casters that don't play the game to a high level at all, they will just watch tons and tons and tons of tape, like over and over again, scrims and just high level gameplay, just like watching everything as in depth as possible. And Josh as well, mind you, like Josh is an absolute bot. Like his knowledge in his brain like doesn't transfer to a mouse and keyboard whatsoever. Like he's super bad, and he kind of embraces it too, right? Which is makes it funnier. But you don't need to be good. Personally, I set a goal for myself, and it's the best way I learn is just kind of playing the game, and that's basically all I did when I was in Contenders. And previous to Contenders too, I was playing Overwatch a ton. But in Contenders, we were actually in Ukraine, if people didn't know. I was living with Trid at the time, and like all me and Trid would do is like sit there and play. Like that's all I do from like the moment I got up to the moment I fell asleep. I would just sit and play and grind the game, because that's how I learned best. And that's obviously just how you get good at things as well. So I like kind of naturally got better. But I think if I was still, a diamond player, like I still think I'd have a fair bit of knowledge of the game just by playing it, because that's how I learn best. Like you don't have to be a high level, but I think in some instances it does help, and some styles of casting it does help as well. Jake couldn't do what he did last year if he was a plat player, because he has such high level in-depth knowledge about the game, because he's played it competitively for so long. That reflected in his casting. If you try and do what Jake did, but you're a diamond player, you're probably not going to be able to get the same effect or the same authority too, because you're not an ex-pro player.
Right. Yeah. It's certainly. I think it again is like an area that a lot of viewers especially seem to think. I think so like Mitch posting about it, like Uber posting about it, that people on Reddit, just got the definitions completely wrong as well.
Yeah,
and
oh
all
my
that,
God,
and
bro.
yeah, that was
That's
unreal.
so stupid, man. Like, it's actually ridiculous how people can comment on casting and like comment on technique and style and everything like this, but they can't even get the roles of a caster correctly.
Yeah.
Though I remember that. By the way, just as a word of advice to any like casters out there, don't go on fucking Reddit. Like, just don't bother, bro. Like, barely go on Twitter. Like, post when you're streaming and doing whatever. Like, just don't listen to Joe Public, man. Listen to the people that have the job you want, and listen to what their feedback is, rather than fucking no names on Reddit just spouting shit 24/7. I know a lot of casters, or not a lot of casters. I know a couple of casters that venture on Reddit a lot, and you can tell, and it does affect people more than you think, like public perception. But not even getting the roles right, like that's mistake number one. Then you try and critique everybody out, try and critique everybody's style and how they cast and stuff. Yeah, good fucking luck, bro. Like there's a lot more to this than actually goes into it. It's absurd to me that people think they can comment on something that they don't really have a lot of expertise in, pretending they almost do. I'm not going to listen to a Redditor when I can just listen to someone like Monty on color casting.
Yeah, big time. Absolutely, like totally agree. Um, to be honest, it's a wild kind of ecosystem out there sometimes, especially Reddit.
Yeah.
Like, can be such a big echo chamber and all that kind of stuff.
One
So
day you
it's
get all
dangerous.
the love in the world, one day you are literally hated. Like
Yeah.
that's just how it goes. There was a period where obviously Mitch, best play-by-play in the league, 100%, one of the best play-by-plays in just esports in general. Some days he is praised beyond all belief. Then, another day, although he won't know because he doesn't really go on Reddit that much, but like one day, boom, hated. Like, oh, Mitch is overrated. Like, fuck this guy. This guy's way better. Also, comparing people is just, you
Hmm.
shouldn't fucking do it. But, people on the internet are going to do whatever. But it's, it is insane. That's just the duality of being like an online personality or like a caster or whatever. One day you're going to be hated. One day you're going to be loved. Just, try not to take it to heart. That's the best thing you can do. Just get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't argue. Moving forward, so I wanted to talk about your recent announcement. Obviously, we've touched a little bit on the duo aspect, that you're getting a new partner in, but also there is quite an intriguing area in the fact that you are non-exclusive this season, right? Which is obviously something that every season, I'm pretty sure, right? Like the Overwatch League casters have been, paid for their time in the off season and all that to just not do anything. I just wanted to get some of your opinions on maybe like what you are planning moving forwards, or I think actually we'll start how I'm not sure if you can touch on or how much you want to get into, but how do you feel about the two ways of doing things? Is there one that you prefer maybe?
It's difficult because there are pros and cons to both. I can't really speak for anybody else. Obviously a lot of talent do share information and that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to speak for anybody else when I say like what I'm about to say. But for me last year, I was contracted through the entire season. Like, day number one, and when the season ended, boom, I was freelance. There are people that are on longer contracts, so like the year, and that includes off season and whatnot. But that's just with any game. Some people are contracted for just the season. Some people are done for the whole year, so they can get extra content in. I was personally just throughout the season. Then as soon as the last match was held and finished, boom. Technically, then I was a freelancer. And the off season, like with off season in many games, there isn't much work to go around because a lot of the leagues are finished, a lot of the tournaments are kind of finished and wrapping up for the Christmas break and whatnot. So there's not much work there. I didn't do any work in the off season for any other games. I did a little bit. Obviously, I did the Steel Series event like a couple of weeks ago. This year, like you mentioned, I am non-exclusive, which is again pros and cons. But if you look at the way the season is formatted, there's a reason why non-exclusive and a few people are non-exclusive is because there aren't that many games at all, and the amount of cast that I'm doing this year is significantly less than last year, so it kind of makes sense to be non-exclusive in this fact. Otherwise they'd be tying you down and then being like, well, you can't work anything else even though you finished like however many months ago, which would suck. And the league or the people that are in charge of this kind of stuff, they do have our best interests at heart. At the end of the day, they're not going to be heartless and lock us in the Overwatch cage for that long. So it's nice being able to think about other titles and work other things. Most definitely, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say it's not. I guess there's not a lot of upcoming games, but things like Valorant is kind of upcoming. At least over the last year, of course, with the Masters and whatnot. I've been watching that a ton, and just being able to flex into other games also expands your own repertoire, and I think it makes you a better caster as a whole. Just being able to do different titles at a very, very good level because you kind of take different styles and different ways to cast things, and then you create your own style of unique casting, which is obviously what you need at the end of the day to stand out from everybody else. So yeah, there's that. But then there was also the other aspect, is which you're only getting paid like the day rate because you're non-exclusive. So there's that, and then being involved in the league as much as possible. They might not want to include you because you're not full time and this kind of stuff. So it's very difficult. There's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. I'm happy this year with being non-exclusive just because I can explore other things. But if the Overwatch League asks me to do anything, like, yeah, I'm gonna be able to talk to them and work out something and hopefully go from there. Because at the end of the day, I do really love Overwatch. You know, like it's a game that I really felt I could cast extremely well and have been putting a lot of time into over the last few years. It's coming up to like what 4 years now? Yeah, 4 years of like casting Overwatch, I'd say, in like contenders and then Overwatch League. So there's that too. There's the element of, oh, maybe they won't include me in some stuff, and that's always a little bit of a worry for me because I want to just do as much as I can with Overwatch because of how much I love the game. But then the other opportunities out there in different titles and expanding my resume in that sense is also very appealing to me too. So I can't really say which is better and which is worse, but yeah, the reason why I'm non-exclusive is because there aren't as many games this year, which it just goes on the format. But then I also like the format, so you know, there's tons of like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe, you know what I mean? But hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, for sure. There's bits everywhere, and I guess leading on from that, you touched a little bit on Valorant, but is there anything that maybe you would like to dip your toes into, or maybe back into with like League of Legends or something like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind giving Valorant a go. I like the pacing of the game in obviously the way it's like CS. There's a slow rumbling at the very start. You know, maybe there's a couple of nice picks early on. You can kind of get hype around that, but then it's a big crescendo at the very end of the round when everybody's fighting, all the abilities are going off. Like I like that pace of casting because it's very slow but sure, and then bang. Same with League of Legends in a way, because you just start off with very small team fights, and then there's the big team fights near the mid game and the end game. And as long as it's not obviously just a roll or like a generic Green Wings game where it lasts an hour. League of Legends 2 is something that I definitely want to dip my toes back in again because League is the game I first started with, and being, I think, away from the game for so long has got its downsides, like being able to confidently cast like all the new champions and whatnot would probably be a little bit difficult, but it's not a game I'm unfamiliar with, so it'd be pretty easy to get back into. And I think I've improved a lot as a caster too, so I'd probably be better at League of Legends casting than I've ever been because of my experience in other titles now. So probably them two for now for like main titles. There's other titles too that I'd like to jump into, like Wild Rift, because I casted Vainglory back in the day. That's something I'd be pretty interested in doing too, but it all depends on what kind of opportunities are coming up. COVID's kind of putting a dampener on obviously a lot of things this year, so we're hoping this year is a little bit brighter in terms of events or like even just online tournaments, because everybody's kind of used to this now. At this point, after a year, there's a lot of cancellations of tournaments and whatnot last year, but this year everybody's kind of prepped and ready to do online. So I'm hoping there are a few opportunities here and there that I can dip my toes back into.
Yeah, I mean, sounds good. I think it's kind of cool. You know, it can be a bit more stressful, I suppose. Like you say, the negotiation aspect in places, you know, for your day rate and all that kind of stuff. It's another thing to think about. But I definitely agree. You made that point about pulling, you know, other things from different titles and whatnot. And I guess now even taking your experience from Overwatch back into those maybe. I think it's really good to learn and to just, you know, every now and then work on something a bit different that is maybe even completely different. I've done like a couple of fighting games, and it just, you know, that change in style is massive. Yeah, for sure. So I think moving forwards, I wanted to talk a little bit more about, you know, you've got a few people in the Overwatch League team. Matt is the one that I would sort of look towards in a way that are maybe taking a bit more of a behind the scenes role.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something that the industry should move on with, you know, going forwards, right? Because I think that certainly in some areas, like your talent managers, your broadcast managers, or whatever, from time to time it can be maybe a bit more of a logistical position sort of thing, and there's not like as many mentors in veteran positions or those with esports specific experience, you know, and maybe there's a bit more of a learning curve for some of them. So do you feel that, you know, seeing someone who obviously has had such a heavy hand firsthand, you know, at doing the commentary, at working on a broadcast, you know, with all those kinds of timings and difficulties that can arise, do you think that that's something that, you know, the industry should move towards in general?
Yeah, I think in general it is almost doing that already. I think Matt moving into a position where he's not like making any decisions on whether we get hired. He's made that joke before, like I wouldn't be hired, yada yada yada, yeah, fuck Matt, etc. But I think it's a good thing that he is moving into a role where he can use all his experience in, like you said, broadcasting, and just I feel like he's done almost every single role. Obviously, he was a player in COD, he was a coach in COD, and um, being able to put that to use in an esports product is really valuable. And I think it's almost going that way, where veteran commentators are taking up more senior roles within a company or an organization to help put on broadcasts and shows and do content and whatnot. I think this year with the league, if you've seen much of it already, it's actually taking a little bit of a different turn in terms of feel.
Mm.
Like Matt did the funny like 70s PSA video announcing the league and whatnot. And I think that is, I love that kind of vibe. I think that's really funny. And I think people should kind of look forward to more influence like that in a lot of titles potentially, because I think a lot of these veteran broadcasters are starting to move to those tiers, and it is very much a good thing because they've had that experience already and they know what makes a good broadcast and a good product. And obviously Matt's still casting this year as well, so that's kind of an added bonus for him too, where he gets to cast and also work on the product that he really loves. um yeah, I think the industry is going this way already, and I just kind of hope it continues as well, because there is certain points where there is going to be a certain point, sorry, where talent need to be kind of cycled in, and some talent need to be cycled out to keep things fresh. I think if you're casting for almost 30 years, there's got to be kind of an end game for you, whether that's moving into the company that you're cast or for the game that you're casting for already, or moving to a different one or a different organization where you can kind of use those skills you've built up. Because otherwise it feels like, um, for me anyway, quite daunting. Like, where do I go after I finish casting? Like, personally, I don't want to stop casting for a long, long time yet, because it's something I really enjoy. But the end game is always kind of a bit gray. It's like a gray area for me. I don't know what's at the end of the tunnel. Where do I go with the skills that I've developed over these years? Is it, back to like a normal 9 to 5 day job? I don't know. It could be anything, but prove almost Matt proving that you can move into this kind of senior role within a company to put on a good product and use all that valuable experience he's gained, I think is a very good precedent going forward for a lot of casters that might be thinking about the same thing.
Yeah, big
And it
time.
also gives newer casters chance too, right? I mean,
Mm.
that the slow cycle out of talent, there are definitely some people in the industry that have tried to move towards that aren't Matt already, and they're slowly moving up into the company and into better roles, and that means more new talent can come in and shine who have maybe not been looked upon previous for like a tier 1 league.
Yeah, for sure. And like I sort of touched on, I think sometimes when it comes to, you talk about moving talent and stuff like that, obviously it varies from game to game, but I think like the whole esports industry in general with those freelance positions, it can be quite, recommendation based. So sometimes there
Sure.
are people that get a little overlooked or whatever. And I feel like having someone who has all that experience, all that skill as well, so knows what to look for, can maybe find the diamond in the rough sort of thing, and bring in some of that newer talent in a more organic kind of manner, for sure. And like I say, I think it's a tough nut to crack. Like, there's no book on this, there's no
Yeah, there's not.
guide, right? And there's very, very few true veterans who've been around for a long time. And also you have to think of your 2000s esports has changed massively to what we have now, and I would imagine it's going to continue changing. So getting those people that have and I think as well, the thing with Matt, like you mentioned, varying degrees, like varying areas, you know what I mean, like broadcast, but also knows a bit about your players and the way that kind of functions as well, having worked so closely and been one, right? So I think that bringing these people in and putting them into big roles is pretty important for the future of esports.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting looking back at least for me. I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but almost probably I can imagine. You go back to when you first started casting, and I was looking up every which way, like, how to cast better. I was looking up sports commentary,
Yeah.
like in football and whatnot, and kind of looking at how they do it, and if there are books on sportscasting, you can definitely buy them. I don't know if I'd recommend any. I bought one and read it, and it's fairly interesting in how basketball commentators, at least, which is the book that I read, and how they prepare, and it was more of a attitude changing book, I think, on how to approach sports casting, or like casting in general, than it was here's what you need to do for this. It was more just guidelines on you should be doing this, like you should be preparing a ton, talking to people, doing this, reviewing tapes, and it was more that than this is how to do it. Like you do this, then you do this, then you do this. It was more like suggestions on how to be a good commentator. And there was videos way back in the day as well with D-Man. He did a video, and I remember how it starts. So you want to be an esports commentator. Like that's how the video started. And I remember the video very clearly in my head. And it was a video I watched several times. And there was a League of Legends caster, although I have actually no idea what he's doing now. Riviera. Oh my god. He used to do LPL like a long time ago with Frosk. Oh my god, it's gonna kill me. I'm not entirely sure what he's doing now. I don't actually follow him on Twitter, but
Yeah.
sorry if I butchered the name, or I forgot him. But he did a video also on how to be a commentator, and like how to almost build a narrative, and how to do this, and this, and just the very, very basics of commentary. And it's something that I watched an absolute ton. And those kind of people are the ones that have had a long esports career from the early 2000s, and kind of built up a career over time, and built up a reputation, and then have almost passed on a lot of their knowledge through these videos. But there isn't much out there at all right now. I mean, the best thing you can do is just kind of look at other people and how they cast, or the people that you want to work with, or you want the job from, and kind of not imitate them. But something that I did in my early career too was I looked at people like Mitch. I looked at a lot of the League of Legends casters as well, and I wrote a lot of notes on how they cast, and how they approach certain topics, and and when they were handing off, and yada yada yada. Probably a bit too many notes, maybe a bit too in depth, but I kind of got the feel of how they did it, and kind of practice little things that they did, and see if it would work with my style of commentary, and kind of went from there. And that's how I kind of developed myself. But everybody else does it miles of different ways, like millions of different ways. Sorry, like there's not one person I think you could say that followed a book on how to become a caster. But it is those kind of people that will eventually make their way into positions where they can help a lot of new casters. I know this year Mitch has been talking about working with the contenders casters a lot, and it's something that I tried to do a ton when I was in contenders, like talking to like Achilleos and stuff, who I've been friends with him for a long time, even before Overwatch came out. And I talked to him a lot about my League of Legends casting when I was doing that, and he was doing LCK. And I talked to Mitch as well. I reached out to him and was like, hey, look at my commentary. Like, I want feedback, I want tips, I want help. And now those people are going into way more senior roles that are more than willing, and more more have better access to people in like tier 2 and whatnot, to kind of build them up. I think helping commentary has gotten better and better and better over the last like 5 years than it ever has been. So yeah, that is what's, I think, kind of happening with people like Matt moving into these roles, being able to help young commentators out and give them advice, and just share their knowledge with them as well. So yeah, I mean, it's good. We're heading in a good direction for sure with commentary. There's more and more help out there than there ever has been. So
yeah, it's big. It's big. I think like you talk about learning your fundamentals, as it were, can be kind of simple, but I think like pushing it to that next level is always something that is difficult to do, or if you have like a bad habit
sure.
or whatever. And I think sometimes, like I've touched on, maybe if you have a solid duo, which I think is starting to become more and more prominent, even in like the lower levels, as it were, of CS. But for a long time, it was hard to, other than the maybe 5 at the top end, the people that were up and coming and doing bits and pieces. Maybe you'd get on for some decent events at like a DreamHack or something. But having to work with multiple people and all that sort of stuff, like I had it a bit early on where some people were very happy to immediately give you feedback, right? And
Yeah.
others would just kind of say, yeah, really good, really happy, when you kind of feel in the back of your mind, you were like, I don't know, I
It's
felt
like,
like that was a
actually, I
little bit
don't think it
awkward.
was. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. I think working with a lot of people, like I did it too in League. I worked with so many color casters. It was ridiculous. Like my longest casting partner to date was Scoundrel in the UK, who like really helped me build as a caster. Like I cast League of Legends with him and Vainglory for the longest time. So 3 years I cast with him. So he's been my longest standing casting partner, and he was the one that really uh I shaped me in a way, but like helped me with commentary in general. Like nailing the fundamentals is super important. I think a lot of people almost skip over that step nowadays. And it's like they want to be the funny guy, the
Yeah.
guy that's always like making one-liners and whatnot, and or like the rap god, which I don't particularly enjoy that kind of casting. I think it's a bit technically forward some of the time, but that's like another story to kind of get into. But um, people people don't get it drilled into them, but almost sometimes no fault of their own because they don't have these mentors, that you need to just nail the fundamentals first. If you don't nail the fundamentals, you can't build anything off that. It's like, I don't know, it's making a good cake, you got to make the you got to make the sponge right before you can add the filling, you know what I mean? It's like that's the best way I can put it. Nail what you've got first, like handoffs and just like team fights, and just being able to commentate in like a basic level and the fundamental level, and then you can add on top like your own flavor and how you want to cast and whatnot. Like that's definitely something that got hammered into me fairly early from Scoundrel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think, because especially this past year, we've seen, like in CS, there's so many tournaments coming about online of varying degrees, whether it's, your big players having to take their lands online, or people that are like, oh, everyone's at home, let's start running something, and therefore there's more and more people casting. And I think that certainly,
Yeah.
in places, people are missing out on some of the key things that you need to hit within even the game and whatnot. And yeah, there's a little bit of like solo cast energy to a lot of people in CS from time to time, just because I think you have your open IP games, or a little tournament only wants like one person to work, or can only afford one, or whatever. So handing off and getting that flow within a duo, again, it can be difficult, moving across. I certainly sympathize, but sometimes people will talk for like 2 minutes, you know what I mean, without letting
Right,
anyone
right.
in, and it's a little difficult. You don't want to be harsh or mean or whatever, so it can be hard. And I think certainly in places the quality of it like has dropped a little bit, and they have like good areas, like massive knowledge of the game or whatever, but maybe talking about a point a little bit too long, and then you miss some of the action. And that is something that very quickly, if we're name dropping my guy John Allen, he very,
John
very
Allen.
quickly was like, look, don't do that. Like, that is a big no-no. I did it
Yeah,
a couple times. Because it can happen in CS, right? Like, you want to
for sure.
build up on the point that someone has just set up, when actually you kind of have to ignore what they've just said, because it's about to, shit's about to hit the fan. So you can't really
Yeah,
touch
yeah,
on what
yeah.
they've said. So stuff like that is I think, because again, they don't like have these mentors, these people coming in, and because the guys who are at the top are so very good at it, they can make that flow work really, really well. And you don't notice that actually he has kind of ignored his point, or they've set it up in such a way they know where the build-up of the round is going to come in, so they can,
Yeah.
talk between themselves before the action. It's not as obvious, I suppose.
Yeah, that's where like, the great commentators separate themselves from like the okay commentators, like being able to almost work with anybody. And that's what I talked about at the very start, was the reason why me and Hex worked so well together pretty quickly was because Hex had been casting for a long time. I'd been casting for a long time, like, and in varying titles as well. So we're very used to not only casting with different people, but also casting in different styles and different paces and whatnot. So it was pretty easy for us after the first couple of casts. Like I think the very first cast me and Hex had, I was like, damn. And it was live as well, so that helped enormously. And online, definitely way more tough
Yeah.
for duos, and especially newer duos. That's why I think me and Visky probably going to start off a little bit rough, of course, like most people would, but we're slowly going to get there. Maybe not as quickly as me and Hex did because we were in an offline environment, but it's going to be really easy with me and Vicky too. But after the first broadcast of me and Hex, I was like, okay, what's going on here? Like, I'm not picking up on your like throws really quickly, and we need to find out when you're throwing, when I'm throwing, and all this kind of stuff. And it was very easy to patch, like super fast. Like New York being the first homestand that I did in the first cast as well of the Overwatch League last year. By halfway through day one, all that kind of faded away, and it actually like fixed itself. And I think we had some of our best casts in Overwatch League last year, me and Hex, at the New York homestand, because well, the New York homestand, the crowd and stuff was just insane as well, which definitely helps. But being able to fix those things on the fly and just rapidly fixing them as well, because we're pretty experienced at that point, was just made it 10 times easier, which is nice. But yeah, if people just more open and honest too, I think that would also help. Like, I think a lot of I don't I don't know if I can't really speak from too much experience, at least in Overwatch, but I think new commentators just need to talk to each other, man. Like, it's not an ego game, you know? Like, you're both there to, if you're just there for clout, you're a clout caster, like, you know, you can fuck off. It's pretty easy to identify if you're there for clout. Like, it's pretty easy, especially if you've been doing commentary a long time. But if you're just there as like a fan of the game and you just love the game and you just love to be able to cast it and talk about it, which is also very easy to spot if someone's like that. There's no ego involved there, or there shouldn't be. Just talk to each other, man. Like, if your commentator's if your duo partner at the time is doing something you don't like, or like you think could be better to help facilitate you, or you could help facilitate him, just tell him or her, you know? Just say like, hey, we should do this, or like, maybe you could do a little bit less this so I can do this, or like, oh, let me do this so I can help you here. You know, it's just be open and honest. That's the only way you're going to get better, you know? It's if you just keep it to yourself, like, it's not going to get fixed.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's a little difficult to navigate, you know, and
yeah,
and
tons of
work out,
personalities,
but
man.
yeah, absolutely,
For sure.
absolutely.
But hey, just get it out of the way first, pull the band-aid off, and it'll make everything a lot better.
Yeah, I think they'll thank you in the long term for sure. But
Definitely.
look, I think that's going to do us. I did say I was going to try the shorter format with yourself. I think we've had a nice rounded conversation with some solid advice towards the end. And it was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no worries, man. Thanks for having me. It's been good to talk, catch up.
All right, cool. That'll do us, I think.